7 owners, 3 bankruptcies. And when the final auction comes, not one buyer shows up. You know Eddie Bauer, the brand that dressed soldiers at 30,000 feet, that put the first American on Everest. But here's what nobody ever told you. Every owner who touches this brand walks away richer. Eddie Bauer gets the debt. This same playbook is running on brands you're buying from right now. February 9th, 2026. Remember that date. 175 stores close for good. 2,200 people walk into work that morning, not knowing it's their last day. Security pulls the keys. Registers go dark. Total debt on this brand at the moment, it collapses. $1.7 billion. On a company that makes jackets. When the bankruptcy auction runs in March 2026, creditors wait for buyers to show up. Private equity firms, retail groups, competitors, anyone. The room stays quiet. Not one bid. A brand that survived a world war, that put the first American on Everest, that clothed an entire generation, and the market prices it at zero. How does a brand that lasted 103 years end up with $1.7 billion in debt and 0 buyers at auction? That answer runs through 7 different owners, 3 separate bankruptcies, and a financial playbook Wall Street has been running on American brands for decades. Wall Street calls it a leveraged buyout. Regular people call it what it is. You borrow money to buy a brand, load that debt onto the brand itself, collect fees while the brand pays the interest, and walk away clean when it falls apart. Eddie Bauer isn't the first, won't be the last. But before we get into how it dies, you need to know what this brand actually was. The numbers alone don't capture what gets lost here. Seattle, Washington, 1920. A young man named Eddie Bauer opens a small shop. Starts out stringing tennis rackets inside a gun store on Pike Street. No. Investors. No business degree. Just a guy from Orcas Island who grew up hunting and fishing and understood the outdoors the way most people never do. His whole approach was simple. Gear should not fail you when your life depends on it. For the first 15 years, the business grows steadily, and Eddie builds a reputation in Seattle as the man who doesn't cut corners. Then 1936 nearly kills him. He takes a winter steelhead fishing trip in Washington state. Temperature drops hard. His wool jacket freezes solid against his body. His core temperature falls. He can barely move. He nearly dies of hypothermia on that riverbank. He survives. Barely. That night, he doesn't sleep. He sits down and starts designing. He knew about goose down insulation, how trappers had relied on it for generations. He engineers a quilted jacket that traps warm air without adding weight, patents it, and calls it the Skyliner. Have you ever worn a piece of gear and thought, whoever built this actually cared whether I made it home? That's what the Skyliner was. Not a product, a response to almost dying. Serious outdoorsmen pick it up fast because they can tell the difference between gear built for survival and gear built for a catalog photo. Eddie Bauer's reputation goes from regional to national almost overnight. Then World War II arrives, and the U.S. Army comes knocking. The government needs cold weather gear for soldiers in the mountains of Europe and the frozen Pacific. Parkas, sleeping bags, equipment that holds up at temperatures most Americans have never experienced. Eddie Bauer gets the contract. 50,000 parkas, 250,000 sleeping bags. And here's the detail that tells you everything. He's the only private supplier in the country permitted to put his own name on U.S. military gear. Every other manufacturer is anonymous. Eddie Bauer gets his name on the equipment keeping American soldiers alive. Think about what that does to brand trust. These aren't customers picking between options on a shelf. When those soldiers come home, they remember the name on that jacket. They tell their families. They buy it for their kids. Trust earned in a foxhole in the Ardennes doesn't go away when the war ends. 1963 makes it permanent. Jim Whittaker, first American to reach the summit of Mount Everest. What's he wearing when he plants that flag at 29,032 feet? Eddie Bauer gear. Not a sponsorship deal. Actual field-tested equipment chosen because it was the best available at the highest point on Earth. That kind of reputation takes 4 decades to build and requires never once asking, what's cheaper? By the 1990s, Eddie Bauer has 600 stores worldwide. Revenue is strong. Hikers, suburban families, East Coast professionals, everyone trusts this name. Then 1968 happens, and one decision starts, a quiet clock ticking on everything Eddie Bauer spent his life building. 60 seconds. Eddie Bauer is in his 60s and wants to step back. He sells the company he built from a tennis racket shop for $1.5 million and walks away from his own name. This was mistake number one. Selling isn't the problem. Founders sell companies every day. The problem is that a brand built on one man's personal obsession with quality cannot survive the moment someone without that obsession runs it. General Mills buys it. The cereal company. Betty Crocker. Cheerios. They own Eddie Bauer. Now, they do what consumer packaged goods companies do with outdoor brands. Sand off every rough edge, soften every strong opinion, swap the performance identity for safe, mall-friendly clothing. The brand that equipped soldiers and summited Everest becomes another casual retail option between the food court and the shoe store. General Mills isn't building anything. They're pulling value out of a reputation they didn't earn, for as long as it keeps generating sales by the time Spiegel acquires Eddie Bauer in 1988, the identity is already fractured. Spiegel doesn't try to fix it. They push store count aggressively, chasing expansion over coherence. The question is never, what does this brand stand for? It's always, how many locations can we open before this corrects? If this story is hitting different, go ahead and subscribe. We cover the brands the business world wants you to forget. This is where the pattern gets impossible to ignore. Mistake number two. No owner invests in the brand. Every owner from 1968 onward takes value out. Not one puts serious money into rebuilding what General Mills broke. Not one asks what Eddie Bauer himself would have asked. What does this brand stand for? And are we actually living up to it? Each ownership group runs the same math. How much can we extract before the next buyer figures out what we left behind? Spiegel files for bankruptcy. Eddie Bauer is on Spiegel's balance sheet and goes down with them. Bankruptcy number one. Eddie Bauer's customers didn't stop showing up. An owner's financial mess became the brand's problem. Can you think of any brand you trust right now that might be carrying someone else's debt without you ever knowing? Golden Gate Capital steps in. 2009. Pays $286 million for what's left. Classic private equity move. Borrow to acquire, load the acquisition debt onto the brand, cut costs, pull management fees, and position for a profitable exit before the debt catches up. Bankruptcy number two follows not long after. The brand that once justified premium pricing through genuine performance can no longer explain why its jacket costs more than a competitor's. The performance story was gone. Nobody had invested in telling it. Then comes the most calculated decision in Eddie Bauer's history. Authentic Brands Group and Spark Group acquire the company and split it down the middle. Authentic Brands takes the trademark, the name, the logo, the intellectual property. Spark Group takes the store operations, the leases, the employees, the inventory, the debt. This was mistake number three. When you separate trademark ownership from operations, you're not trying to save a brand. You're engineering an exit. The trademark side collects licensing fees with almost no overhead. The operations side carries all the risk and all the debt. When operations collapse, and with that structure, they will, the trademark walks away clean. Then comes Catalyst Brands in 2025, the J.C. Penney merger. Eddie Bauer, the brand that put the first American on Everest, is now one struggling label inside a bloated portfolio, fighting for budget alongside brands in equally rough shape. The losses go in one direction. 2022, $2 million. 2023, $10 million. 2024, $82 million. 2025, $80 million in the red on $440 million in revenue. The parent company pushes $215 million in internal loans trying to keep the lights on, then stops. February 9, 2026. Bankruptcy number three. 175 stores close, permanently. 2,200 jobs gone. $1.7 billion in debt. And in March, the auction where nobody bids. 103 years. Zero buyers. Eddie Bauer doesn't die because outdoor fashion changes. Not because Amazon beats it on price. Not because customers stop wanting quality cold weather gear. It dies because 7 different owners run the same math. Take what you can, load the debt onto the brand, and get out before the damage lands on you. Each owner makes money. The brand absorbs the each it.do. That's 7 times across 60 years. And you end up at a March 2026 auction where the room stays silent. What collapsed wasn't the brand. The brand got used up. When you see a brand you grew up trusting disappear, do you ever stop and think about who actually got paid while it was dying? So here's what this means for you, not just as a consumer, but as someone who works, builds things, or runs anything of your own. Every brand, every company, every institution you trust is owned by someone. The question isn't just whether the product is good, it's who owns this. What did they pay for it? How much debt did they put on it? And what do they plan to do with it next? The playbook that killed Eddie Bauer isn't rare. It's running right now on brands you shop at every week, restaurants you eat at, companies where your friends work. The system isn't hidden. It's just counting on you being too busy to notice. Now you know what to look for. If this story made you angry, good. That's the right reaction to watching a 103-year American brand get dismantled for management fees. Hit subscribe. Every week we pull back the curtain on another brand that got bled dry while the public looked the other way. And if you want to see this same playbook hit a completely different industry, a company that paid $338 million to acquire a brand and then spent $800 million destroying it in 9 years, that story is right there waiting. Watch it next.